up until 1963, is actually against doctrine for Catholics to be burned, to have a cremation ceremony. So the Vatican II Council could change that, but old habits change slowly. So nowadays, though, slightly more than 50% of Catholics choose cremation for the burial. And so for $7,000 to $10,000, this will open up. You can fit 2 urns inside there, close it back up. Now, what you also recognize, by the way, that $7,000 to $10,000 means it's yours forever. That is not always the case. If you're out in certain countries in Europe, a lot less land, a lot more burials over the years, places like Belgium, France, Spain, the money you spend only basically is rent. And every 25 to 35 years, if you don't pay again, your relatives get kicked out. You're evicted from your niche. And if nobody comes and picks up those remains, you're now reburying in the pauper's field. So, hopefully you have relatives who will take care of you in the afterlife. Come on closer. It's okay. Don't worry. Nobody has visited this grave in about 120 years. It's all right. So, John Curry was one of 15 villagers in an Irish town known as Knock, K-N-O-C-K, Knock, Ireland. Those 15 villagers in 1879 witnessed what was now known as the apparition of Knock, meaning a Eucharistic version of Christ on the side of the church. The story is that the rain hit the walls of the church in such a way that it looked like a lamb, that's the Eucharistic version of Christ, angels of Mary and Joseph, and it was not getting wet on that part of the wall. These 15 villagers kept to that story. The Vatican confirms these kind of things, and they did so. So now the apparition of Knock is listed as an official visitation from Christ. And so John Curry, at the age of 5, while sitting on somebody's shoulders, witnesses this apparition. At 5, he doesn't have much control over his life. The family eventually moves to the U.S. Farmingdale, Long Island, to be accurate. And he lives a very quiet, unassuming life, buried in an unmarked grave. Recently, Cardinal Dolan, knowing that, doing some research on the apparition of Knock and finding out that John Curry had moved to the U.S., tracks him down, takes him out of the cemetery in Long Island, and here and buries him. As a requiem mass for that, during that time, there was the Prime Minister of Ireland was here, 30-piece choir and orchestra, all of John Curry's living relatives from Ireland came in. It was a big celebration, and now, within the Catholic faith, there are several things known as shrines or pilgrimages. The Shrine of Knock is one of those things you make a pilgrimage to. Part of that pilgrimage now includes visiting John Curry's grave, because it's the only one they actually know where he is. So. income was her slaves. So most of the money that he made went straight to her to keep her living a certain lifestyle that she was used to. But Pierre was one of the few professions that slaves were allowed to do back in 1787, which was a hairdresser. He was a very good hairdresser. This is a time period where women were spending about $1,000 a year, in those days money, on their hair. You've seen various paintings of these women with these giant, big, bushy, white hairstyles. That's him doing a lot of that for like Eliza Schuyler. Does that name ring a bell for anybody? Any Hamilton fans? Yeah. Eliza Schuyler is Alexander Hamilton's wife. Also doing the hair for a person named the wife of Robert Livingston, a very powerful judge here in New York. Now, even though most of his money is being taken by his owner, he gave able to save a little bit, allowing him to buy the freedom from his sister, his cousin, and his future fiancée. On the deathbed of Marie Berard, over the objection of her second husband, who didn't want to lose a good income stream, Pierre was able to buy his own freedom as well. And so from 1807 on, he now takes the last name Toussaint. Anybody else ever heard of that name, Toussaint?
Sounds familiar.
Toussaint Louverture, the gentleman who led the Haitian Slave Rebellion in 1804. So it pretty much tells you what he thought about slavery the very first chance he gets a name. He takes the name of a man who fought the English, the Spanish, and the French to make sure that slavery would not be reinstilled in Haiti. So, it says a lot right there. Now, he lives until the 1853, and he can now, like every Cuban, gets to keep the money he actually earns from his hairdressing, and he's one of the founding trustees of the church. He's in there. So in 1809, as this church is being constructed, a lot of the money, you asked him about money, he's donating it. He's donating the money. Come on in. Lots of room.
Oops, sorry. Good. Cat.
Let me make it easier for you. So, Eckert originally had gas jets in here, but he said, you know what? We're in a land of electricity. We're in the age of electricity. So in a time period where most people hadn't even heard of electricity, let alone had any houses wired for it, this guy put electric lamps inside his vault. Now, these are the original Edison Electric Company fixtures. Yes, when Edison was still alive, light fixtures. The bulbs are copies, but we actually still do own the originals. We take them out, we're a little worried about them breaking. Edison bulbs, when he first built these, he didn't have the planned obsolescence in them that we now do, right? Because if a light bulb lasts forever, what don't you buy any more of? More light bulbs. So if they break, you'll buy more. So Edison originally conceived the light bulbs to last forever. In fact, in his museum, his factory in West Orange, New Jersey, there's still an Edison bulb plugged in that's been running for about 110 years. So, yeah, but Eckert was extremely wealthy. This is not brick, this is tile. This is what's called Guastavino tile here. By the way, so Eckert is all the way in the front. You're standing next to Eckert there in the front, the middle one, yes. That's Thomas Eckert, right there. This is his second wife here, Joanna, and this is his in-laws. Joanna's parents are below him, below his second wife. Now, that gravestone is also of the in-laws. So they took that out of the cemetery, carried it down that flight of stairs, all the way down the hallway, down those 3 flights of stairs, and then put it here. Imagine carrying that thing that long. It's absolutely huge. Now you may notice also that there's room for 12 in here. I mean, you only got 4. Here's the other slabs they were ready to use, right here. They're ready to put this in. By the way, that hook, that ring, that's where the rope would have gone to raise the coffin up, and you would have slid it in. So why is there only 4 out of the 12? And that is because, well, let me say there's a couple of theories. The first of which is, here's a big shocker, the second wife is much younger than the first wife. Probably pretty close in age to his kids for the first one. So maybe there's some jealousy about the in-laws being here with the second wife. Or, what's the other thing everybody argues about with a wealthy person? The will. So, when the will was read, the older son got $1.5 million. The younger son got $50,000. The younger son was ticked. I mean, to say, challenged the will in court, making the claim that his father was old and senile and could not possibly have meant to do that will, because Thomas Eckert was 97 when he died. But the judge sided with the younger son, and the money was split evenly. And after that, maybe that antagonism, well, you took the money, and you can't be here. They argued over who was going to be buried here. And so there hasn't been a visitor to this vault in over 70 years. That is why there's no lock on it. The last Eckert never bothered to install a lock. This has been open, so we get to see it. If the Eckert family ever shows up with a deed, if the deed is produced, the argument would be, okay, we're going to have to close this on down. But, no family deed, you get to come in. Now, what's also unique about this is not only the Edison light fixtures, but the Guastavino tile. My New Yorkers, have you heard of Guastavino tile before? Everywhere in this city. This is Raphael Guastavino, by the way. More famous here in New York than his hometown. I'm going to make it a little dark here, no panic. And he made a lot of tile. He's the most in-demand, one of the most in-demand architects in the city in the early 20th century. And this is probably the most private place you will see the Guastavino tile in the city, in this vault. This is the event space underneath the Queensboro Bridge on 59th Street. This is not moving. There we go. Anybody recognize that? Oyster Bar, Grand Central Terminal. Am I hitting? I don't know. That's why I'm hitting the right button. That's why. I'm dark, I can't see. This is the Municipal building, right next to the, by the way you get down the Brooklyn Bridge. If everybody remembers Crocodile Dundee, you don't have to reveal that because it dates yourself. But, you know, this is not an knife, that's a knife. This was this scene film there. All right, younger crowd. Anybody recognize this? Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Yeah, they filmed the big magical battle at the end of the movie was filmed here. This is the old City Hall subway stop, also loaded with Guastavino tile. You can still see this. There's the legal way and the illegal way. The legal way is you wait for the 3 times a year that the MTA museum opens it up to members only to take a tour. The slightly less than legal way is to just stay on the 6 train. When the number 6 train pulls into the new Brooklyn Bridge station, usually announced by the MTA, you're going to get off this train, nobody allowed to stay on the train, right? Stay on the train. And then you said number 6 does a U-turn through the old City Hall stop, and then it becomes the uptown train. If you do it through the daylight, the sunlight will shine through the grates, shine through those glass, and light up the entire station. If at nighttime, riding the first trains to the car, so the subway lights light up the platform. Before you could go through here and the lights are still on, but they've shut them off probably because we've been sending people down here for about the past year and a half, telling them how to view the old train station illegally. This is the Whisper Gallery in Grand Central. So if you stand here and diagonally, not here, diagonally, you whisper and the sound will travel up along that arch and the other person on the side can hear it. So, this is Eckert as general. This is Eckert as president of Western Union. And this is Eckert working on the telegraph lines. I don't know how he didn't catch his hat on fire on those live wires above him, but back in 1865, those wires were not insulated at all. So, not only did Eckert spend on the electricity he spent for the most in-demand architect for the Guastavino tile, he went all out for this, $83,000, $2.5 million today. So an impressively large vault. Does anybody have any questions about General Eckert?
So eventually, would the church sell these spaces? Is that
No.
a time limit on it?
No, it's not, because the deed is a contract. And the contract is involved, the Constitution says the government cannot void a contract. So nobody can, once you sign it, a contract is in place forever. And so if there somewhere in America, who knows where, there could still be the contract that gives the permission to use this deed. So they cannot touch it. They can't put anybody else in here. That's why if you want here, you got to go to the new one. $7 million. Start saving. Any other questions? All right. Come on out, folks. Watch the stairs again. There's a bit of a lip here. I'll leave it open.